Welcome to the Citizens Reporter. I'm the host and editor, Diana Longry. Thank you for tuning in. The Citizens Reporter is a weekly news cablecast program brought to you from the Valley Access Studios in Stillwater. Now, to help me with this week's news is Mr. Mark Bradley, one of our regular citizen reporters. Thank you, Mr. Bradley, for being here.
Thank you for having me. And I wanted to start out with something that I found interesting on the internet. There was originally Maplewood was going to have a business engagement happy hour where we could actually visit. And I was going to ask you if you wanted to come with me to this event, and you could take a look at it, but they must have not found any interest in it.
This event that Mr. Bradley's talking about was originally scheduled for December 4th from 4 to 6 o'clock, it looks like.
Right.
And it was going to be where? At the community center or some other place?
Well,
I see. It was going to be at the new business there on White Bear Avenue, the Unison Restaurant and banquet area.
Right. And I happened to notice that they decided to cancel it out. I was actually looking interested in finding out what their plans were for the future, because as you who watch this all the time know that I've been asking where Maplewood's going and what is its plan, or is it just trying to market us as a good place to build welfare housing?
Mr. Bradley, did they give any reason for the cancellation?
No, as you can see, it just showed it as canceled on the sheet here, and you can see the cancellation that they put as part of it. That's why I photocopied it so I could bring it in to show you that, because I found it intriguing that it was something that, again, our city competently says, hey, we know what we're doing, but after the fact, it seems like everything's thrown underneath the bus.
And they still couldn't even have a happy hour.
Right.
Well, what's next, Mr. Bradley?
Well, the one thing that I was interested on, and it was actually it was an editorial done by a Bloomberg opinion reporter, Justin Box, talking about the best rail in the world. And they're talking about the U.S. Rail trains.
As it says in this particular piece that Mr. Bradley's bringing to our attention, it says that the Rail Passenger Service Act of 1970 freed private railroads from the requirement of providing passenger service and created the government-owned National Railroad Passenger Corporation, or Amtrak. So it sounds like before this that the rail lines had to provide passenger service.
Right.
So that's, I guess I didn't realize that's how Amtrak was formed. Thank you, Mr. Bradley, for bringing that to our attention. What's next on the agenda?
The Minnesota History Center is featuring the Native point of view in its newest demonstrations of what was happening in Minnesota. It's an excellent article that talks about in the Pioneer Press Sunday, December 1st. And if you want to read it, you can read it there. But what's intriguing about it is it talks about what was happening here. It makes us more aware of that, rather than just talking about casinos, that they have a real presence that's been forever here in Minnesota. And we should be giving them a little bit more interest than we really do right now.
Right, right. And this particular article that Mr. Bradley's bringing to our attention is in the Pioneer Press of December 1st. That's a Sunday one. And it's entitled The Native Point of View. And it's highlighting the new Minnesota History Center exhibit that shows how the indigenous people are connected to the land. And so you can see it's right, first page article below the fold, and talks about the display that is available. And do you recall, did it say how long this particular exhibit is going to be available?
I don't remember how long it's supposed to be available on it, but I think it's well worth taking a look at because it's also covering the area extent of it. So it's not just Minnesota, it covers Wisconsin and out to the Dakotas, because they weren't precluded by governmental lines that we've created today.
Right,
it was a regional area.
Yeah, that's right. They didn't look at state boundary lines or
Right.
anything like that. It was more, as you indicated, more of a regional
Right.
area that they lived in. What's next, Mr. Bradley?
And then, because of the future of the real estate shows, patient advocates are surrounding the alarms for St. Paul Hospital that's looking at being converted, and I think we discussed about that one.
And this is St. Joe's, correct?
Right. And I want to relate that to what's happening through the Health East group.
And certainly this is an issue that we've been talking about on these news programs, about some of the trends that are emerging when it comes to hospitals and the length of stay that patients are staying in hospitals today. More and more of the procedures that used to be overnight procedures, where you had to stay overnight at the hospital, are actually being taken off the list of overnight stays, and that there's more and more emphasis on moving procedures from overnight stays to a day procedure. And that is a trend that we've discussed on these programs. That's why when Maplewood city staff and council members, William Knutson, who should know better, are proposing that they're going to have a hotel next to St. John's Hospital, so that the people who have family and relatives staying overnight in the hospital, that they can stay at the hotel, that's really kind of out of whack with what either the trends are, or out of whack with the fact that St. John's Hospital is really a hospital that serves the local community here, that people, if they're going to have a friend or a relative stay overnight because of a procedure and they're staying overnight at the hospital, they're just going to drive home the 15 minutes it takes them to drive home, then stay in a big hotel at $150 a night.
And also the accusations against St. John's right now is it has excess beds. So why would St. John's be able to do resident guest rooms for any patients who happen to have relatives at this point?
Mr. Bradley, isn't that a novel idea? Rather than build a hotel, the hospital could take its extra beds and say, okay, we have a guest wing.
Right.
And this is where the guests can stay, and we'll just rent the room to them. Well, now doesn't that solve the problem of the hospital of how to fill beds?
Right. And I mean, that would give St. John's a new lease on life right now.
Also in this newspaper of the Pioneer Press of December 8th is an article I want to bring to the attention of our viewers, because on other of our news programs, we have focused on the trash hauling going on in St. Paul and the organized trash efforts there. We've focused on other news programs on Ramsey County's identifying organics as an area they want to get into for pickup and recycling. And in all of these newscasts, we've also touched on the fact that there is a change in the trends of recycling today, in that the recycling market in and of itself is very tenuous. It's struggling. Right. And that many times when people are doing recycling, the recycling items themselves, because of what they're put with, they're contaminated. And this happens in organic recycling, it happens in regular recycling, that there's contamination. Well, here on the front page of the Pioneer Press is an article which is in line with everything we've been reporting on these news channels, that just because you're saying that you're recycling, it doesn't mean that it's actually going to end up recycled. It more than likely could very well end up just as trash. The headline says, "New rule for recycling. When in doubt, throw it out." That it seems counterintuitive, but struggling market has forced changes, which is exactly what we have already reported here, that when you have contamination in your recycling streams, the recycling is not what it should be, and that much of what you think is being recycled is just being thrown out. And we reported, I think 2 months ago, that much of the recycling that Eureka Recycling has, they actually bring over to Waste Management to throw out, or to bring to the Ramsey County trash center to be cared for. And so here, this article is indeed showing Eureka throwing out the recycling. And so we have reported that this was going on, and guess what? The Pioneer Press now is reporting that it's going on. So folks, you heard it here first on these news programs of Put Your Hands Together Productions. So Mr. Bradley, thank you for bringing this article in and showing that, you know, it's good that they got the news, even though it's after the news we presented.
Right. Then I have something here that Ramsey County considers new property tax. I have a problem with that in a couple of ways, even though they're saying this is a tax that's already being done in Anoka-Hennepin. Anoka-Hennepin has had a real problem that they take the money and use it someplace else and run. They haven't been building enough welfare in their area, as far as I consider.
You mean voucher housing is
The
what you're
voucher
talking
housing,
about,
yes.
okay?
Now, Ramsey County is on the other side of the situation. They've built much of the housing, or it's been built for them. And in the case of the Catholic Charities have built a lot of housing in this area. So the fact is that...
Well, and then to be clear, I mean, they're not building it for Ramsey County,
No.
the entity, but it certainly is being encouraged by the Ramsey County commissioners through their policies, and that it has been encouraged through ways of approvals
Right.
and
Sometimes even some
welcome
funding, yep.
and welcoming arms, and
Right.
in some cases financing.
Right.
Right. Mhm.
And what I was trying to make the point here is that I don't really hear the real definite crux of the issue here from any of the newspapers at all. And that's what really frustrates me. When we read all this stuff, it says we do need more housing because there's a lot of people out there that need subsidized housing, which is another way of saying welfare housing. But the reality is that we don't look at where the percentages of these subsidized housing units are and how it affects the tax base in that area. And that's what I've been trying to make the point of, is that when we're looking at it, if you have a level above a certain point, it starts to bring more problems to the area. It makes it harder to be able to keep your schooling, your police department, and all the other stuff funded properly. Because if you have to take it off of people that can be actually physically taxed, you have to have a source. And what we're really looking at here is where the proposals are usually being made. It says, hey, there's a lot of people out there, and guess what? The rich areas don't want them, so we're going to put them in your area. But what is the percentage that live in Edina? How many of them live out there in Wayzata? How many of them live out in Excelsior?
Case. But the issue that I think that you bring up is a good one, in that is it equally distributed
Right.
through the entire metro area. And that is actually one of the roles that the Metropolitan Council is supposed to be involved in, is to ensure that whether or not if it's voucher housing or transit or sanitary sewer pipes, that they are adequately distributed throughout the entire metropolitan area that the Metropolitan Council has authority over. And so part of the reason why all the communities that are in that area every 10 years have to submit their comprehensive plans to the Metropolitan Council is so that the Metropolitan Council can oversee how each of those communities are looking to guide their communities with respect to the whole. And the Metropolitan Council does set goals for each community as to how much affordable housing has to be built in that community in the next 10 years from those plans. And so what would be interesting to know is whether or not Ramsey County has met or exceeded the goals that were already set for it by Ramsey County. Same thing for St. Paul.
Right.
Now, I know that when I was mayor of Maplewood, that at that time, back in, say, the area time between 2005 and 2009, the Metropolitan Council had stated that in the next 10 years, that Maplewood only needed to build approximately, I think it was 388 more affordable units of housing
Right.
in the next 10 years. 388.
Right.
Well, in the course of that time that I was mayor and the next year after that, Maplewood certainly had 388 units of affordable housing built in Maplewood. So I would be willing to bet that Maplewood is right about at its limit right now, at what the Met Council has expected of Maplewood to do as its share, as its part. And so the question would be is what is that number for St. Paul? And has St. Paul met or exceeded that number, or
Right.
have they not? What about Wayzata? What is the number for them? Have they met or exceeded it? So you see, that would be a fascinating piece of data to get from the Metropolitan Council as to what are the guidelines that have been set for each community and where is each community in meeting those guidelines.
I do have an article here in the Pioneer Press. This was December 13th, discussing the plan now by Kennard to build a lot of housing in the old 3M site that is going to be there.
In
It's going to be-
in Oakdale. That's right. And we have had previously film footage from one of those community meetings
Right.
on these programs where they were discussing the various plans that might be possible for that big 3M property site in Oakdale. And this particular parcel of property is 208 acres. So it's a
Right.
huge parcel. And I know at the time when we had this report previously that they were looking at having a combination of housing, both market rate and voucher housing, but also to have some commercial in there. Now,
Senior.
has that changed at all?
Well, it has. There's no more commercial in there because of across the street. I think they determined they have a development that's not really growing that much. So it's mostly supposed to be townhouses and all types of different housing, including senior and a couple of apartments. But mostly it's just supposed to be housing as such now, and the whole area is supposed to be planned for that.
Right. Now, this is in the Pioneer Press of December 13th, and it, again, it's right on the front page here. It does say that they're looking at 1,410 homes to be built there. And of course, that's what the one title says, and then later on it says units. So keep in mind, homes kind of could be misleading and make you
Right.
think that they're talking about single-family housing or duplexes or something to that effect.
They also do a
but
breakdown there.
it's really units.
Right.
Yeah, Mr. Bradley, let's take a look here at that breakdown of the number of units. It says that the Lennar Corporation, which is a Miami-based housing company, it has submitted a preliminary plat. So this is beyond just the, oh gosh, wouldn't it be nice stage.
Right.
This is actually at the preliminary plat stage now. And it says that the plan includes 644 single-family homes, including townhomes and row house units. And also there would be 766 multifamily units. Those are apartment buildings, and would include senior housing. and that some of the apartment buildings would have more than 100 units each. Now that's a pretty large apartment complex when
Right.
you've got 100 units in a complex. And it does confirm that there's not going to be any commercial development in this proposal. In the second half of our program, we're focusing on some information on trends in the retail mall arena, and also an update on the Myth and its liquor license.
I did go to the BRT demonstration that was out at the local fire station there.
Oh, and this is where they had their poster boards up on easels?
Right. There's not enough people that are going to be able to supply the financing, so it's going to be another boondoggle that's going to be covered by taxpayers.
Yes.
And I'm finding it ironic that I'm now a conservative because I'm talking about conserving money that can be better used in more logical ways. Now, if I could see that this was bringing in business and industry like it has done to the University Avenue area, that would make sense to me. But I don't see any in it as this, because there is no businesses that have said, we're going to build this campus out here, or this is going to be this industry that's going to be here, or that we have this massive amount of housing that's going to be directly next to a central core area, so we could have rapid
but you
transit.
see, they're trying to make the Gladstone area that central core area of the housing, because remember, they changed that density
Right.
from 26 units per acre to 50 units per acre. So that's the plan. They're going to make that the epicenter of the housing to support the BRT. But then the next follow-up question is, where are those people going to go to work?
And
Are they going to be working north of there? Well, let's see. Where would the jobs be? Would they be working south of there? Oh, the jobs are in St. Paul, all the government jobs.
Right.
Well, but are the people who are working for the federal government, the county government, the city of St. Paul, the other governmental entities that are located in St. Paul, are those people going to live in high-density housing in the Gladstone neighborhood? Are they going to move from their single-family homes that they live in, where they live, and move to high-density housing in Gladstone? I don't think so. And so you see, it follows right along with what your questions are, Mr. Bradley. What is the functional outcomes of this particular BRT route when the people that you're building homes for and housing units for, that you don't even have jobs for them to go to?
And you got to ask yourself, what contractor would come in and build housing in that area? Is it because it's got a beautiful lake there? Does it have a lot of entertainment facilities, other things?
Mr. Bradley, the reason that those contractors are building the housing is because cities like Maplewood are giving them the financial incentives to do so. That they say, well, if you come here, we'll give you tax increment financing, which will pay for all your costs to build it, so you could build it because this is our policy. We want it to be built there. And so this is our incentive to you to build it, is tax increment financing. Or in the case of, that's been discussed by the city of Maplewood, loan of money, because they can't give out tax increment financing because they already did that in that district.
Right.
And so instead they have to give out a loan instead, which they have to understand, as the city attorney indicated to them, that there's always that potential that the loan might not be paid back.
And that's what I'm trying to make the point is that when we're looking at those contractors, they aren't going to be building it to lease it out to somebody who wants to pay $1,000 to $3,000 a month, or
The market rate is what you're referring
right.
to.
Because the fact is that there is nothing around it that would make them want to live there. And like you said, because it's so dense, they don't want to be on somebody else's back door all the time. So this is going to not help the tax base of Maplewood. It's going to hurt it in a major way. And that's what I'm looking at with this thing, is that when we're looking at these plans for the light rail, for the bus rapid transit, there's some hard questions that have to be asked. And when I was at that meeting, the answer I got was, well, don't worry, we know what we're doing. What they're looking at for the bus rapid transit is to have the station at the end of Harvest Park. And they will be constructing a building on that site.
Right, and on another one of our news programs, we featured the presentation where they're actually talking about building a potential parking ramp there at that location, and that they're going to combine the parking for the park together with the parking of the BRT. So that means that the folks that use that park won't be able to park where they normally park, close to the fields that they use.
Right.
So yes, thank you, Mr. Bradley, for attending that meeting. That's very helpful to have you out in the field and observing what is happening at those events. Now we're going to be switching gears here and looking at some information that we've come across that is speaking to the trends in mall retailing. Now, we, of course, in these programs have addressed Maplewood's North End Steady group recommendations, which essentially look at the mall area, Maplewood Mall area, as an area that is going to go by the wayside, that as a major commercial area, it is going to lose its commercial glory, and it's going to become an area of high density housing, all in an effort to support the investment of the BRT. And those are words exactly from the meetings that we've presented here on these shows and the clips that we've shown. But just recently, a very world-renowned and largest property management company, CBRE, they have come out and they were speaking to some of the trends on national TV with regard to malls. And what some malls are finding is rejuvenating their foot traffic. So let's take a look at our first clip, which...
If millennials killed the malls, teenagers are going to revive them. That according to new research from CBRE and to major REITs like Preet, which just opened this $400 million project, Fashion District in downtown Philadelphia. Now, CBRE says 81% of teens prefer shopping in stores. It says Gen Z's spending increased to $143 billion this year, and it influences $460 billion in spending.
So time and time again, we would hear at these North End Steady work group meetings, which Mr. Bradley was a member of, is that what was killing the mall is the internet and the sales on the internet, and that the malls are going to go by the wayside. And yet in those study group meetings, they did not have any professional property management personnel come in and talk about the trends that are going on today, whether or not it be that many malls are being converted over into other commercial industrial uses such as distribution centers for Amazon and other companies such as that, news programs that we've discussed on these channels. And Mr. Bradley, I know that when you were at these meetings, you had indicated to them different trends that you knew were happening, but they didn't want to listen to you.
Right.
And so here we have, this is nationally being recognized that now that the next generation is wanting to go back to the mall for the social interaction, because just going on the internet may not give you what you're looking for when you're looking for a shopping experience. Let's continue.
They are huge fans of what's known as click and collect, meaning they click online and they like to pick it up in the store so they can get the tangible experience, they can get the social experience, and then the key is that they are buying more.
So you see, that makes complete sense to me. You know, you can certainly just buy online, but what is the satisfaction of that? I mean, sure, you get the item you're looking for, it comes to your door, that's convenient, you don't have to go anywhere. But, as the gentleman from CBRE indicated, that the next generation, they're looking for more than that. They're saying, well, we got something we want to buy, but we want to go out and about. We want to do things. We want to see people. We don't want to just be stuck in Facebook world.
Right, and on the other side of that coin too, something that's for us old people that realize the reason we started going to the malls was the fact that when we went to any type of shopping store there, the biggest problem we'd have was did it actually fit? Just like when I used to be a shoe salesman, I'll use that as a perfect example. I'd buy a pair of shoes, or I'd sell a pair of shoes, and if it was Italian, it'd be narrower. You got Americans had wide shoes. Orientals had the sizes would be comparable, but actually were shorter. So the fact is, depending on where you got your shoe from, it didn't always fit. So you had to actually try it on to make sure that it fit, even though it was the right size as you read it. If you have it mailed to you, you don't know if you're getting the right shoe. And you may have to mail it back 2 or 3 times.
Right.
Saves you all that inconvenience.
And as this gentleman from CBRE was indicated, that the new generation, they are looking to pre-order and then they go to pick it up. So basically what they are saving in time is that they're saving themselves the looking through everything, hunting and pecking through stuff.
Right.
But when they get there and they pick up their item that they have pre-ordered, they're in the store, they're having that experience, but then they see something else that goes with what they just bought.
Right.
So now they've got an add-on sale, and for anybody who's been in sales of any kind, you know the importance of that add-on sale. You got the base sale, and then you always want to have that one little add-on because that's what helps make the numbers. So let's continue.
Traffic is the new rent. Fashion District has one of the nation's 3 pop-up Candy-topias. That's an amusement park with a sugar rush. It also has several Instagrammable art areas, a bowling alley, movie theater, and of course, teen apparel stores.
We've done a number of redevelopments over the past 3 to 5 years, and we're seeing upticks in our traffic in the mid to high single digits. So yes, but that's not to suggest that every mall's a winner. That would be foolish to say right now. I mean, people have said that 40% of the malls in this country are obsolete, and I've sold off 50% of the malls that I don't want to own.
So this CEO from Preet, he has indicated, okay, they've got some hot properties that are on the uptick, that they've done reinvestment into these malls, and they've brought more experiences into those malls, and they're bringing foot traffic back into them, and that's a good thing. And that some of the properties, though, that they know may not be as responsive to those kind of investment efforts, they've sold off. Well, that, of course, is very consistent with the other trends that we reported previously,
right,
where many of these commercial properties, these mall areas, because of where they were located at transportation corridors and in very good locations with regard to where other businesses are or other industry, that they are actually then being converted into distribution centers or other commercial uses. Now, he did not say anything at all about we are converting them all to housing units or residential, because quite frankly, for a community, to decrease that best and highest use from commercial down to residential, especially when you're on a transportation corridor, that's not always, that's not in the best interest of the community and the property tax base.
The one thing I was very interested in seeing was what he said to me, what I heard was that making them more of a destination, which we've talked about many times, where he talked about bowling alleys, movie theaters, things that we've seen in a lot of the malls before and are even in our malls up here in Minnesota. The reality is that by making it where there's more reason to be there and stay there, people are more willing to buy there.
That's right. And we have, I think it was last week's program, identified this other new trend in malls where they're expanding the concept of the food court and actually making it more of a food destination where
Right.
there are many different types of restaurants within the mall so that a person can actually try a little bit at this one, a little bit at that one, a little bit at that one, and try a lot of different cuisines. And really have that total experience, and that it's not just the typical sit-down restaurant concept.
Right.
So interesting. Well, let's continue.
Now, Preet is investing nearly $500 million in new development, and other major REITs are investing even more to change the whole concept of the mall. And another benefit of Fashion District here is that mass transit comes right up into the mall. Again, it's all about that foot traffic, Courtney.
Now, I found this fascinating that she tied that together with the mass transit. Now, certainly in Maplewood, that's part of their whole big idea that they're saying, we're going to have the BRT go up to the Maplewood Mall area. It's going to have a stop there. There's going to be, that's going to help people can go there. And yet, they are on the other side of that coin, looking at their plans that Maplewood Mall is non-existent.
Right.
Let's pull up our next clip, which shows Maplewood's redevelopment recommendation and plan for the Maplewood Mall area. Currently, if you were to look at the Maplewood Mall area and how the land use is being currently used, it would be all red buildings. As you can see from the key there, red is retail or commercial. So currently it would be all red. This is Maplewood's future plan for the Maplewood Mall area. You can see very little that is red, very little. You see a lot of orange, which is mixed residential. Mixed residential, which means mostly housing with a few little shops mixed in and around the housing. And then you've got yellow, which is all residential. So you could see how, while on one hand, Maplewood is saying, oh, we're going to use the BRT, and that is going to rejuvenate the mall. And yet, on the other hand, the Maplewood Council has approved a plan that decimates the mall. So which is it? This is sending mixed signals, not only to the community, but mixed signals to the development community, to the commercial community, to the retailers. Which is it? Do you think the BRT is going to rejuvenate retail? Or do you think that the mall is going to be dead and you have a plan that basically shows that it's non-existent?
Well, the one thing I would like to point out, Diane, is that if you take a look at how the bus rapid transit, well, the bus system they have right now, before the rapid transit, they aren't even going up to the mall because of they are picking up people at where they have their park and ride, which is outside the mall, and it means that people have to walk across the driveways and the parking area to get to the mall.
And keep in mind, with the BRT, it won't be any different.
Exactly.
Because the BRT is going to use exactly the same location for its drop-off and pickup.
So it makes it inconvenient for anybody who really wants to use the mall, especially during foul weather times, because they will have to go, and there isn't a type of way you can get right to the mall and off of the bus like you can do in Roseville or Southdale.
Mm-hmm.
All those, the bus stops right at the shopping center itself.
And who's in charge of figuring out where to have the buses stop? The Metropolitan Council.
Right.
Well, let's continue with our report.
It is all about this, the phone, that millennials didn't grow up entirely with the phone in their life, so they thought it was so thrilling, so interesting. They wanted to do everything online. But Gen Z grew up with it. It's obviously a huge part of their life, but they're also not obsessed with it the way that millennials were in shopping. I don't know if I 1,000% believe that, because I do see teens on their phone, especially mine, but they do want that social interaction.
It is interesting too, Diana. Obviously, I see the board behind you there for Philadelphia Station, and commuter traffic does sort of guarantee some foot traffic, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee that they buy, that conversion happens. I know that that's been an issue, I believe, with the Westfield World Trade Center here in New York City. 300,000 commuters every day sounds good, but if they're not walking out with bags, it just, sort of becomes a thrill.
And isn't that the issue? Is that you could have all kinds of foot traffic, all kinds of people walking through, but if it's just a pass-through and nobody's buying anything, well, you still haven't accomplished increasing your retail sales. So that's where it comes to, again, to that point of what kind of investment needs to be done in the malls to create the environment and the atmosphere that generate sales. Well, let's take a look at our next clip.
The mall all day yesterday, and there were definitely a lot of people walking through with bags. Now, yes, they're trying to attract them with all sorts of things, wellness, health. You saw all the attractions that we showed you there, but they are going into the stores, they are buying, and the research is showing that those sales are actually increasing in the mall. But again, it's very specific malls. You can go out into the suburbs to strip malls, they're empty, and there are definitely malls that are not doing well. But these specific ones that have a lot of foot traffic in major urban areas and that are designed with other things in the mall, they seem to be doing better.
So it goes right to that point again of a destination location.
Right.
What can be done to make a location like the Maplewood Mall a destination location once again, so people say, I want to go to the Maplewood Mall area and spend some time, spend some money. Well, certainly we have talked on these programs about one of the businesses up by the Maplewood Mall that does make that area a destination location is the Myth Night Entertainment, the Myth Entertainment Center. And we've shown on these programs where the City Council has taken actions against the Myth that were unconstitutional, and that the Myth then has sued the city of Maplewood with regard to those actions. Well, now at the last City Council meeting, it came up for review. The Myth's liquor license came up for review. And certainly the Myth cannot be an entertainment center and have concerts and be able to do a good business and be that destination location if they don't have a liquor license. That is key, number one, besides having good bands and good music coming there for their events. So we have film footage of the hearing that was held at the Maplewood City Council meeting regarding the liquor license, because the city of Maplewood, they don't want to acknowledge that they were wrong, and they're not going to settle the lawsuit anytime quite yet. But they still want to make it look like they are in control. So let's get started with the film footage from the City Council meeting.
I have two concerning the 2020 liquor license renewal. City Clerk Sint, do you want to begin this, please, with the staff report?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. All intoxicating liquor licenses and their subsequent renewals are required to be approved by council, and the liquor licenses all expire each year on December 31st. Tonight, we have a resolution for you to consider to grant renewal for 2020 for Myth Live 2 Inc., which is located at 3090 South Lawn Drive North. The renewal resolution also contains public safety conditions, and as spelled out in the city code, when conditions are placed on a license, the licensee can request an administrative hearing regarding those conditions. And previously tonight, you have been given the letter where the licensee did request a hearing, and so you will be having an administrative hearing tonight. If the conditions are approved by council, or whatever conditions are approved by council tonight, those conditions will remain with the license until it's removed by action of council.
This is the issue that is under litigation between the Myth and the city of Maplewood, in that the city of Maplewood went and put conditions on the Myth and their operations without having given the Myth due process. And we've covered that previously. So here we are. They need to have their liquor license renewed, because as you heard, it's renewed annually. They are the city of Maplewood, knowing that the whole litigation piece involves the fact that the city of Maplewood has put conditions on the Myth. They are continuing with their desire to put conditions on the liquor license, whether they're called for or not. So they're basically thumbing their nose at the Myth and saying, well, okay, so you sued us about this. Well, we believe we're right, and we're going to keep those conditions on there anyway, and the litigation will go on. That's the end result of what this means. And so here we have then the conditions on the liquor license. The Myth asked for their administrative hearing so they could be heard as to why these conditions shouldn't be on there. And if the city wanted to resolve the litigation and wanted to have it go away, this would be one good step they could take, and that would be to remove the conditions that were unconstitutionally put on the liquor license. But I'll let it play out from here, so let's continue.
After the hearing, council is asked to consider approving the resolution in order for licensing staff to renew Myth Live 2 Inc.'s on-sale intoxicating liquor license for 2020. And it must be noted that upon council approval, the applicant, Myth Live 2 Inc., will still need to fulfill the licensing requirements and provide all of the proper paperwork and fees for the actual renewal to happen.
Thank you for that report. Council members, do you have any questions for Ms. Sint? Since this is an administrative hearing, we have an opportunity for representatives from the Myth. Mr. Skolnick, I understand that you were going to be presenting tonight?
That is correct.
So the city council members were given an opportunity to ask questions, to comment, but there was none of that. The council had no questions, they had no comments. They were probably instructed by their attorney not to say anything, since this is all subject to the litigation going on in Ramsey County. So let's listen to the attorney.
Is from the Myth. Mr. Skolnick, I understand that you were going to be presenting tonight?
That is correct.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to be brief. I have written out my notes. I know last time when we were here, it was a rather lengthy meeting. So I will start, and at the end, I will give a recommendation and suggestion on how we can move forward. The last time we were here, you treated my client and her lawyers with a disgusting display of disrespect. You demanded respect, but you did not give respect. A true failure for public servants. You allowed Councilmember Juniman to yell that my client should not have brought her lawyers, since she did not care what lawyers had to say. She did not care what the evidence was or the facts. The irony that she screamed that statement about bringing your lawyers with Mr. Batty, the city attorney, sitting next to her, that irony did not go unnoticed by those watching. Mayor, you're a lawyer, and you know better. But rather than tell her her statements were out of line, you made it worse. You refused to let us address the comments and to respond, and then you ramrodded the so-called operational action plan to a vote.
And of course, he's referring specifically to the fact that Councilmember Kathleen Juniman told the Myth and their representatives, next time, don't bring your attorneys. We don't want your attorneys here. They're the ones causing all this trouble. Leave your attorneys at home. And as we covered on our news program when we went through the complaint in detail, this is actually one of the allegations in the complaint, that the Myth is being told that they should appear at these types of proceedings unrepresented, without attorneys. Now, of course, nobody believes that that is the best practices for a business who is working to defend their property right in a liquor license that is at the heart of running a successful entertainment business. With that, we're going to continue with the film footage of the attorney's comments in their entirety, so that way you can hear them without interruption. I want to thank you for listening to our program this week. And Mr. Bradley, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be back again next week with more news. Bye-bye.
Had you allowed us to respond, we would have advised you of three things that would have prevented the substantial financial damages that were inflicted by your action. First, the operational plan created by Mr. Nadeau was unconstitutional. Second, you intentionally misstated that my client had agreed to it. Third, there was no factual support for the basis of the city's actions requesting conditions. As to the first statement, the so-called OAP was constitutionally flawed. This city council's authorization of the chief of police to close the Myth, a license holder, without any due process violated the United States Constitution and the state of Minnesota Constitution. In addition to violating the constitutional prohibition that the government can't take away a property interest without due process, the standard in the OAP was so vague that it could not withstand constitutional scrutiny. What you said basically was, Chief Nadeau could, I quote, is authorized to order the closure of the business to the next council meeting. No hearing, no allegations, no findings, no reasons. He could just on a whim do it. The city is being represented in our lawsuit not by the city attorney, Mr. Batty, or his law firm, but rather retained an outside law firm. It's crystal clear that that new law firm has now advised the city council that the specific provision was indeed illegal, which is why that specific provision was left out of your new OAP. I say thank you to the new attorneys for the city for acknowledging that the city's actions taken in June were illegal. But unfortunately, it's too late. The damage has been done. The city's announcement that the chief of police could shut down the Myth at any given moment caused entertainers and musical performers to refuse to perform at the Myth. And in addition, they would require, if they were to perform, to be paid all up front in case the chief closed the Myth. This caused my client's business to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. Your actions approving that resolution was the very definition of arbitrary, capricious, and oppressive. Your failure resulted not only in the hundreds of thousands of dollars of damages to my client, but resulted in the city being sued by my client to hold you accountable. Your failures also resulted in the real estate developer that we had obtained that wanted to build a $20 million hotel next to the Myth to abandon the project. Imagine if the government said that Delta Airlines and only Delta Airlines could be shut down at any time without any notice, without any hearing, without any due process. Would you book your vacation flight on Delta? I would think not. What this council did was, in effect, tell our patrons, don't buy a ticket because you don't know if the show's going to take place. It's been devastating to my client financially. Now, I want to share with the council, and just as important, the citizens of Maplewood, certain facts that the city has now been forced to admit in our lawsuit. First, the shooting on May 29, 2019 did not happen at the Myth. The city has now admitted that. Any statements by representatives of the city to the contrary is a lie. Second, the shells from the shooting were found exactly where I told Chief Nadeau they were, at the Wingate Townhomes, not at the Myth, not on the parking lot at the Myth. Third, and this is a big admission by the city, although it's plainly obvious, the Myth has not violated any liquor license regulation, statute, or ordinance. That is now an admitted fact. Fourth, Ms. Brockie has not violated any liquor license regulation, ordinance, or statute. You decided to impose conditions on my client's liquor license despite my client not having violated any law, any liquor license regulation, any statute, or any ordinance. In fact, my client's liquor license was the only one that had conditions placed on it. So why single out the Myth and only the Myth? There was no factual basis for it. No criteria was established. No reason was given, no written reasons were given for this adverse action against my client's license. Ms. Juniman has stated in the past that she wanted to close down the Myth. She's made that statement without any evidence. She, of all people, should have recused herself from voting. She was hardly impartial. She gave no consideration to my client's constitutional right to due process. She gave no consideration to my client's property rights. Now, I know that Ms. Juniman is not a lawyer and may be ignorant of the legal rights or the constitutional rights of citizens. But there's no excuse for Mr. Batty, the city attorney who was sitting here and sat silently. He knows the law. He knows the requirements for due process and a fair hearing. And Mayor, you're a lawyer. You went to the same law school I went to where we studied constitutional law. You could have and you should have understood what was being proposed was illegal. But rather than use your legal knowledge and experience, you went further and refused to let us respond, and then ramrodded through the OAP. You know better, and the citizens of Maplewood deserve better. Now you have a chance to mitigate the damages. Mitigate the damages you've caused. Here is my suggestion. My client and I beg you to do the right thing tonight. The right thing would be to approve the renewal of the liquor license without any conditions. The conditions proposed on my client's license are retaliatory for having us brought the lawsuit. You have the opportunity to mitigate those damages that you caused because you can let the public know the Myth is open for business. If you buy a ticket, you don't have to worry about whether the show will be canceled. You will let the entertainers and musical acts know that if you play the Myth, you don't have to worry about your show being canceled and losing a day to make an earning and earn a living. In conclusion, I ask the City Council, approve the license renewal without any conditions that apply only to the Myth. Thank you.